And this is CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. Melissa McDermott reporting at CBS News headquarters in New York. Headlines at this hour: the supreme leader of Afghanistan's ruling Taliban is urging his people to face the threat of a U.S. attack firmly and prepare for a holy war to defend their faith. Mullah Omar recalled that both the British and Russian empires had failed to impose their will on the Afghan people in the 19th and 20th centuries. A possible break for investigators: the cockpit voice recorder has been found from the Pennsylvania plane crash and is said to be in fairly good shape. Also, the House voted final congressional approval, authorizing President Bush to use all necessary force to respond to the attack on America. The first arrest in the worldwide investigation of the attack. The FBI says a material witness now in federal custody in New York may have highly relevant information. Investigators confirmed there were 19 hijackers involved in the mass murder-suicide attacks. Some lived and worked openly in the United States for years. During a day of national prayer and remembrance, President Bush flew to New York City to the scene of rubble and ruins of the World Trade Center to help in the rebuilding process and defense at home. Congress approved a $40 billion aid package for starters. The president approved the call-up of as many as 50,000 National Guardsmen and military reservists. This morning, nearly 600 people have been confirmed dead. About 5,000 others are still missing in Tuesday's attacks. Scott Pelley is at Ground Zero.
The search and recovery operation is a 24-hour effort, all day, all night, all conditions. On Friday morning, we were back at Ground Zero with the search and rescue crews on a morning that rain was added to the mix of misery. No one has been found alive in here since the first few hours after the collapse, not in 3 days. But still, they look and listen and wonder whether there is a space, a small place where life exists inside what has become a vast tomb for thousands. This morning, the disappointment was showing again. So many hours with no good news. Michael Caruso is a firefighter from Cape Cod. It must be frustrating.
It is. It's very frustrating. The magnitude of the work here, it's going to be weeks to get it all done.
It feels like weeks already for the many thousands who haven't heard from their loved ones. So many places in the city now are papered with the faces of the disappeared.
Looking for my dad.
Bob Ferris's father was in one of the towers.
He was on floor 102 of the building. I was really concerned because my dad and I were very close. And, we used to hang out at lunchtime. He'd come from the World Trade. And now he's missing, and we don't know where he is. So.
This man lost his brother-in-law.
It's impossible to believe that this has happened. Still.
He's a father, has a 2.5-year-old daughter. He's godfather to one of my children.
And you hope he's still there, even though you know there may not be much chance.
There's no chance, I don't think. I hope, but we'll just pray.
On his tour of New York today, the president met privately with family members and saw the enormous devastation that has changed his nation. Joe Albaugh is the president's point man in disaster recovery here. He's the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. You were with the president down at the site.
I was.
What was his reaction to it?
Well, he has a torn heart, much like most of America does right now. But I will tell you the resilience that he saw in the eyes of the workers, fire, police, emergency crews, that spirit that we have here in America is just an affirmation of his resolution to not only see this through, but see the crisis at hand through to the bitter end.
What are the chances No one has come out of that building alive since the first day.
Right.
No one ever came out of the Oklahoma City building alive after the first day.
Right.
We're on day 4. What are the chances?
It's tough. You never know. I mean, you've got Twin Towers there. There's a lot of pancaking that has taken place. There could be significant pockets. I don't want to raise false expectations, but there could be pockets where people could still be alive, and that's what we're working hard at achieving. We're never going to give up hope, but time is working against us right now.
How do you deal with that?
Pray. Suck it up. Go in and do the job you have to do. That's why I admire the bravery and the dedication of men and women who put their lives on the line right now as we speak down on the pile.
How long does that operation go on down there at the end of the island? Is this weeks? Months?
You have to keep in mind, maybe you don't know, there's at least 500,000 tons of debris that has to be removed. You have bodies, hopefully victims that are still alive, and it's a crime scene, so it's painstakingly slow to go through.
I have the sense, quite understandably so, that you're very deeply affected by this.
Yes. I was here a week ago with Rescue 1, and they were one of the ones who were first on the scene. Chief Ray Downey was on my left, Captain Terry Hatton was on my right. I sat around a table. The entire crew that was on working that shift. Here they are a week later, they're all gone. Yeah, it takes its toll. It affects you. It's the toughest thing I've ever done.
On a street corner just a few blocks from the disaster site, supplies are piled high for any rescue worker who might need them.
All right. Oh, great. Dry socks.
Catherine Hopper, a woman from the neighborhood, has finally found a place to volunteer.
I went to the police station. They really didn't need my help. Red Cross is booked. Got turned away from the Javits Center, and I could not sit in my apartment anymore. So I came over, and Paul said, just grab a hand. And it just, policemen and firemen drive up, and we give baby wipes and food and socks and underwear and anything they might need. I don't know where it came from, but people are just handing stuff out.
She's like many New Yorkers. These days, they have to stay busy to keep the anger under control.
I mean, how the hell could you do that to innocent people? And now I'm angry. I mean, I've gone from crying to now I'm angry and I want retaliation. I want it swiftly. I mean, I want no man standing who did this to us.
On the mountain, anger is laid aside for now, masked by weariness. The sleek columns of steel that soared into the sky, pride of a nation, are handed out broken one piece at a time. There will be many nights and months to go before they reclaim this sacred ground. Joe Albaugh, the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, told us that 5 national emergency mortuary teams have been sent to New York City with all of the equipment necessary to do DNA identification of any remains that are found in the debris. Scott Pelley, CBS News, New York.
And at 4:08 this morning, the death count from the Trade Center stands at 124 bodies. This morning, though more chilly, around 50 degrees, the skies are clear. That wasn't the story Friday. After midnight, a storm moved over Manhattan, making the rescue workers' already treacherous job even more dangerous in the slippery mud. All through the night, the drenching rain fell. Lightning and thunder at times. But the determined crews couldn't, or more accurately, wouldn't stop their grim task. For the first time since those horrendous moments Tuesday, the weather in New York City reflected the mood of the city. Gray skies, a more appropriate backdrop for the massive destruction than the clear sunny skies of the days before. But the sun did return, just about the time the president arrived to offer relief. Now to the investigation into who is responsible for the attack on America. We're learning more every day about the hijackers. Correspondent Jim Stewart is heading the CBS News investigation.
Men like Mohammed Atta, who gave his age as 33 and a resident of Hollywood and Coral Springs, Florida. Atta is believed to be the pilot who flew into the World Trade Center's North Tower at 8:48 Tuesday morning. His colleagues were mostly younger men, virtually all in their 20s, and with names suggesting Saudi and Egyptian backgrounds, some with the last name indicating that they may have come from the same extended family if in fact they were not directly related. Most astonishing is that some may have lived here off and on for years while they attended flight schools and burrowed into their American communities.
The fact that there were a number of individuals that happened to receive training at flight schools here is news, quite obviously. If we had understood that to be the case, we would have, perhaps one could have averted this.
And some listed addresses, true or not, it remains to be seen, all over the country. 7 in Delray Beach, Florida alone, others in Hollywood and Coral Springs, Florida, 3 in San Diego, and 1 each in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and Phoenix. As the search of their old apartments and rental cars continues, including at this group house in Vienna, Virginia, where the Dulles Airport hijackers are believed to have stayed, agents have also discovered that the men were incredibly well-traveled. Some had been in and out of the country on several occasions, officials say, and had a wide range of acquaintances. It seems clear, however, that not everyone who knew them knew what they were planning.
We've conducted hundreds of interviews around the country. We've served over 30 search warrants in various places. Hundreds of subpoenas have been issued.
Some of those interviews have followed well-publicized and heavily armed interventions at airports as cases of mistaken identity and simple immigration problems caused more airport shutdowns. The FBI said it hopes to alleviate that problem.
We have dispatched sent to the various major airports, FBI agents, teams of FBI agents, to assist in quickly resolving any incidents that may come up.
Authorities also have 2 people in custody who are cooperating with authorities and may have significant information about the attacks. But clearly the most striking note of the day is that these hijackers were nothing less than sleeper terrorist agents who had apparently been planted in this country quite some time ago. And the only logical question to ask is, could there be more still here? Jim Stewart, CBS News, Washington.
Not far from Capitol Hill, workers are continuing to inch their way through the shattered walls of the Pentagon. Search crews have recovered both flight recorders from the American Airlines jet that slammed into the building on Tuesday. 190 people are believed dead, including all 64 people on board the airliner. The building remains in danger of further collapse. Recovery efforts now are aimed at shoring up the parts of the structure near the crash site. Damage estimates are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. If the U.S. decides to go after Osama bin Laden in landlocked Afghanistan, our forces would have to cross some other country's territory to get to him, most likely Pakistan, with its on-again, off-again history of cooperation with the United States. But bin Laden also enjoys significant popular support there, as CBS's Alan Pizzi reports from the Pakistani capital.
The terrorist attacks were the theme of sermons at Friday prayers in Islamabad's mosques. The outrages were condemned, but there was also a message to America not to be so quick to point a finger without hard evidence, a reference to what is seen here as a revenge-driven effort to get Osama bin Laden. That sentiment was echoed by the faithful.
America should wake up and realize that stop being a terrorist to others, and then, it calls everyone else a terrorist.
As much as the Pakistani government says it will cooperate with the U.S., the degree will have to be carefully calibrated to avoid an Islamic backlash. This is, above all, a Muslim country. Many of its citizens see Osama bin Laden as basically one of them. A diplomatic offensive by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban played to that as hard as possible. Speaking through an interpreter, the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan said blaming bin Laden was the easy way out.
The Americans should not be in a hurry. They should have patience and conduct neutral investigation in this regard in order to find the real culprits.
But the fact that the U.S. sees bin Laden as a prime suspect sent an undercurrent of tension through Pakistan. That won't be eased by the news that Pakistan's equivalent of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said today it unanimously agreed to a list of recommendations for cooperation with Washington and was on the brink of a momentous decision. But if indeed that includes basing American troops here, public opinion won't be quite so accommodating.
The ground troops, I would say, is not a very good proposition. There are a lot of dangers. You can say locally, regionally, I don't think it would be accepted.
Having committed itself to the fight against terrorism, however, Pakistan's leaders may have little choice but to do whatever the U.S. demands. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Islamabad.
CBS News consultant Mitch Mitchell and retired Army colonel and military analyst is following this story in Washington. Mitch, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Melissa.
Let's talk first about the home front. When we're talking U.S. military action, calling up reserves, what would they do?
Well, there are several things that the reserves would do, Melissa. They are called up for homeland defense primarily, but that entails a lot of things. That means that the Air Force folks that we call up from the reserve will actually be flying missions in aircraft to defend our country. Naval reservists could be out on ships, and of course the Army can be doing a number of things. They can be defending positions, extra security. In addition to that, we're also calling up medical people, engineers, port facility controllers, people who can help us launch attacks.
Would you put this on the same footing, same equation as, say, the Gulf War as far as military personnel?
Well, they're the same type of people. They are the support people, and we have never in our history had a combat operation where we haven't used the reserves. They are essential to us going out and fighting wars and winning them. Now, the people that we brought in right now, the 35,000, I think are just a start of what we're going to bring in the end. In the Gulf War, we had 250,000 people from the reserves called up so they could help us fight Operation Desert Storm. I'm not sure we'll reach that number, but I think we'll go a lot further than we are right now.
And speaking about the Gulf War, that's probably the closest example of what we can have to compare what we're up against coming up. How do we fight this war? This is so different than anything we've ever had to fight.
This is going to be a new one for just about everyone, although terrorism isn't new at all. The idea of fighting a terrorist is to equate it to a boxing match. In this kind of war, you want to be the puncher and never the counterpuncher. You want to get the blow in on the terrorist before he has a chance to hit you. Ascertain exactly what his intentions are, what his location is, and then go and get him quickly. And therefore, if you do that, you will not have incidents of the type we had on the 11th.
Are you talking ground troops and air troops then?
Oh, absolutely. There'll be multiple combinations of forces. You're not going to have large-scale invasion forces go and land on one end of a country and sweep it clean to the other end. That's not the type of military operation we're talking about. Rather, pardon?
Go ahead.
Rather, what we're going to talk about, I think, in the types of attacks that we'll conduct are a series of short, violent raids on installations and on relatively secure areas so the terrorists think, and then we'll just go ahead and strike them and make them quite well aware that where they are is no longer a tenable position. If they die, they die. We're not out to capture them.
Some of the countries we're talking about, or allies of a particular country we're talking about, have weapons of mass destruction. We know chemical warfare. This is particularly daunting when talking about facing this.
You know, the weapons of mass destruction issue is the most dangerous thing that we face, that we'll ever face. They are weapons that are not that difficult to manufacture if you deal with the chemical and biological side of things. Now, when you deal with a nuclear weapon, that's a different story. That takes a degree of sophistication. But you can produce anthrax, you can produce sarin cheaply, and it doesn't take a huge factory or a number of scientists working with absolute into minute detail to make that happen. The capability of some of our enemies right now is such that they could hit us with a chem or bio attack and create casualties that would dwarf the number of casualties that occurred so far in the 11th of September incidents.
So to prevent that, we need to strike fast and strike hard.
Absolutely. You know, the idea is to be the puncher and not the counter-puncher. That's the essence of the whole thing. And of course, then that takes us into the intelligence area. In order to do that, we have to bolster our intelligence assets considerably and ask the American people to pay a higher price for their protection. We've got to get human intelligence and other sources of intelligence on the ground near the terrorists so we can find them quickly before they take action against us.
Finally, did you ever think you would see this type of military action being planned?
Well, I hope so. I've worked a lot in anti-terrorism, and we've been pushing for our military leaders and our civilian leaders to learn to think like a terrorist, because we know that terrorism is probably going to increase in the 21st century, not decrease, before we finally have a chance with a coalition of nations to bring it under control. Right now, it's about to go out of control.
Retired Army Colonel Mitch Mitchell, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
And we have an update on that story right now. You remember us telling you about a man arrested at JFK Airport on Thursday for trying to use a pilot's fake ID. That man is the same man we told you about earlier who has been arrested in connection to this case. Now, to prepare for any military action of any kind, U.S. troops must train, but Navy bombing training has been the object of protests on the Puerto Rican island of Vieques until now. Protest groups say because of the terror attacks, they're canceling their planned disobedience against exercises slated to start September 24th. But the groups say they'll hold acts of peaceful protest if the Navy follows through with its plans to conduct 25 days of training. The horrible actions on Tuesday have shocked this nation and at the same time drawn Americans together. This was the scene last night at Union Square Park right here in New York City, which has become a gathering place for those seeking comfort and seeking an outlet for their sorrow. One of many such places across the country where we're looking for answers to questions that really have no answers. There's an old saying that you have to be tough to make it in New York. And New Yorkers are clearly a tough lot, but this week's events have clearly left the people here shaken. Here's Richard Schlesinger.
Come on, let's go, up the block!
This is what life is like in many parts of New York this week. At Grand Central Station, a bomb scare. Somebody said they saw something suspicious.
A lot of people start to see things.
It was enough to order the immediate evacuation of Grand Central, and it was all for nothing. No device was found. This incident was all scare and no bomb. These days, police have no choice but to consider every threat as the real thing, even though many of them are hoaxes.
We have having numerous bomb scares here in the city.
In just one day this week, there were 90 bomb threats in New York, and famous landmarks were frequently targets.
There was a phone call into the Empire State Building of a bomb threat.
Even though nothing was found after the evacuation, the Empire State Building is still a tense place today. Everybody is checked going in, and it's getting uncomfortable for some people to go to work in a high-profile building, the tallest one left in New York.
When you walk in the building, and you walk down the hall and into your office, you're looking around.
You looking around?
I was looking around. I was looking around to see if there's anything on the ground. There any unusual people walking around?
Larry Chaffetz works at a law firm on the 64th floor. He saw the attack on the World Trade Center from his window, and now he's always on guard.
At any moment, if there's any inkling that there's a problem, I'm leaving the building.
You know that. You've made that decision.
I made that decision.
That's what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
All through the day and all around the town, New York echoes with the sound of sirens. They are almost constant reminders that all is not well. And New York is not alone. In Kansas City, a bomb threat emptied City Hall.
How dare somebody do that? I mean, this is crazy.
And in Jacksonville, Florida, a bus station was evacuated when somebody noticed a package that seemed suspicious. It turned out to contain clothes.
How realistic are all the fears? Who knows?
For 29 years, Norbert Garrett worked for the CIA in the Middle East. He's familiar with the pattern of terrorism.
We have seen perhaps the first phase of a carefully orchestrated terrorist plan. Clearly, the authorities believe that there's reason to worry about a second phase, even before an American response is launched.
The authorities are on edge for the same reason everyone else is on edge here. Most people used to think there were limits to what terrorists would do until this week.
Now, like the rest of the world of sports isn't revolving around the next big game. Instead, teams, leagues, and even individual players are searching for ways to help those directly affected by Tuesday's attacks. Some examples. $2 million from the PGA Tour, plus more if fans don't seek refunds from this weekend's canceled events. The NBA has contributed money, as well as socks and sweatshirts. Entire NFL teams have donated blood. And Major League Baseball fans will be reminded of this time every time they watch a game. Players will wear American flags on the backs of their uniforms for the rest of the season. When the Twin Towers crumbled like concrete building blocks, it sent a shockwave from sea to shining sea. To put the loss into perspective, we sent CBS's Steve Hartman into the broken heartland of America.
The numbers of dead and missing, the enormity of the devastation. It has been an overwhelming week for all of us. So for some perspective, we step away tonight to the town of Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania. We came here partly because it seemed like one of those towns that would never change.
It's going to change everybody's life forever. It'll never be the same.
I have been hanging on to my daughter for the past 2 or 3 days, not wanting her out of my sight. Can you say hi?
And yet, while everyone keeps talking about how America may have changed for the worse, what has gone relatively unnoticed this week is how Americans themselves seem to have changed for the better. Look around. You don't have to be a fashion maven to know what colors are in this fall. Everywhere you look, red, white, blue, 13 stripes and 50 stars, give or take.
It only has the 48. It's a flag that's been here in the storage area for a number of years. And we just
about
didn't,
50, I would guess.
we just didn't know. It hasn't been that long, has it?
Needless to say, it's been quite a while since America has felt this much patriotism, or this much passion.
This woman came in today to my office and she had a letter to the editor and her eyes were filled with tears and I said, "Did you lose someone?" And she said, "No." She said, I want to get my words out. I want to say this."
Diana Lasco is the editor of the Mount Pleasant Journal. Last week, Diana was covering the heated city council debate over whether or not this street sign should be moved a few yards.
Personal, petty political differences, they're gone. We're going to put those rivalries aside tonight. No more us and them. It's just us.
Just Monday seemed everyone was a Democrat or a Republican, rich or poor, black or white, Mets or Yankees. Just last week, we were all so different. And whatever happened to those New Yorkers who would just as soon step over you as help you?
And I don't think anyone would ever go, "Oh, well, those, you know how New Yorkers are." No, obviously, we didn't know how New Yorkers were because they are just like we are.
And that's one reason we came here tonight. And this is the other. Officials estimate roughly 4,750 people are dead or missing at the Trade Center. And if you have trouble absorbing that number, all you have to do is think of the people you just met in this town. Think of all the others here you didn't meet. Think of everybody that lives in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania. Population 4,750.
watching continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America.